Hey everyone, Wendler here, and today we're going to go on a little bit of a rant. And this isn't really targeted at TMV specifically. I have no issues with TMV, but it's more so going on a rant about how content creators value data and how they try and communicate that data in a way to a more casual audience that I feel is misconstrued and often can lead to a false perception about the actual reality of certain agents or certain comp win rates, et cetera, et cetera. It can be misleading, and I just want to talk about that in a little bit more finer detail in this video. So, if you don't know who I am, for the past year, I worked with G2 Esports as a volunteer assistant coach. I essentially was an assistant coach without the official title or being paid as such. The main notables you would have seen that I had hands on for would be the icebox defense wall that we changed going into champions, which I actually have a video on my channel discussing that. And then the other major notable is the Abyss comp that we played versus 100 Thieves, which was the Yoru, Silva, Astra, Viper, Killjoy comp that also shared with Fnatic. And that's because I worked hand in hand with Anders on that before we both kind of ended up positionally where we were. So if you're ever wondering why Fnatic and G2's comp look so similar, that's why. We both theorized at the same time. But anyways, knowing the back end research that I did to explain why I felt Yoru was better, I feel I can approach this narrative in kind of explain in more context how you can assess data like this more efficiently. And on top of that, just in general, discuss on how you, even if you're a more casual viewer, can take this information and find different solutions or different routes you can take from it. So specifically for this video, TMV talks about, we have this Yoru comp, Yoru, Silva, Astra, Jet, Omen that has a relatively low win rate. And this kind of raises the question, why is the win rate for this specific Yoru comp so low? Which is a fair question to ask. From here, we go into agent or comp archetypes. We see that, double initiator or some type of flex initiator comps have really high win rates on the map. And Ascent Standard is falling off, Double Duelist is falling off, and Double Orb is falling off. And the big significance I kind of want to take here when we're going to look at the general data in a bit is the combination of Yoru with this Double Orb comp, and that in turn has pushed Yoru's win rate lower than probably what it should be for this map, and why I feel it's bad to draw a conclusion as to why one agent is better than another on it. So from this, and I'm assuming a lot of people, maybe if you're clicking on this, have watched TMV's video about meta assessment, but just in case you haven't, I want to give him a fair shake when you watch this video for the first time. So from there, we go to this non-mirror win rate conclusion, where Jet has a 63% win rate on the map, and Yoru has 26% win rate. And he immediately takes this and starts to logically draw out why Yoru is just weaker on the map. So some of the points he talks about is Yoru's flexibility. So I don't mean if I missummarize this poorly, it's not intentional or it's not malicious, but one of the points he brought up was it's really hard for Yoru to be in position on extremities and then equally have a gate crash that's has coverage on the opposite side of the map for these rotations. The other point brought up was his attack gate crashes are relatively exec specific, whereas Jet's ability to take space is a lot more fluid. So if a Yoru throws these gate crashes, and he used Fnatic as an example, if your Yoru takes this out of sync, they're out in the open. Whereas if you have a Jet here instead, Jet can take top box, Jet can take back sight, Jet can dash on top of Tetris, and there's a bit more fluidity to where Jet can go. And I think that's a little bit of situational analysis that's unfair to Yoru, but we'll get to that. And then defensively, the value for Jett just comes with the verticality Jett can take. So Jett can take B, Jett can play top box A, Jett can dash around A, can do the opposite here, etc., etc. So real briefly, I want to touch on the aspect of what Yoru provides on this map and the reasoning for why I felt Yoru was so strong. So to talk on the first point, Yoru can throw gate crashes from mid and play B, or from mid and play A relatively cleanly. There's no restriction on these gate crashes. And if there's a gate crash here, it's because of the basis that we're playing with an Omen who can flood flash retake for us while we have Astra Util to support, right? A lot of these gate crashes that are self-set on site are to sort of enable the flood protocol that this map kind of turned into after Champions Korea last year into the offseason, where this double orb narrative kind of blew up. So that's why you have this gate crash, then Yoru can immediately flash and scale onto site. But at base value, not including anything else, Yoru can be positioned on extremities and still throw these opposite extremity gate crashes. There's no issue there. Additionally, the other major point I want to talk about is Jett cannot play an aggro mid line, an aggro A line, or an aggro B line, take a shot and get out safely without being punished. The lines are completely different. And you can make the argument about, well, Jett can just play this line and fall back. But the issue is these lines are relatively predictable. If you go back and watch DRX last year when they even beat Fnatic, and before that, the op pathing was predictable by DRX. And it's the one thing Fnatic, and if you talk to Anders or Mini, it's the one thing they talk about that they just didn't punish hard enough, was these opening op lines. So if you're only able to play in these finite spaces and then you're stuck playing retake, you actually have less options than you do more options. Whereas if I'm Yoru, I can play these aggro lines, have a gate crash to get out. I can then go to this top box line, have this gate crash to reposition. I can play top heaven and hold this off angle sight line and have a gate crash to reposition. I can play deep mid, take an opening shot, and then get out and reset either A or B and reposition. And these are things Jett can't do. Because as mentioned, if Jett tries to take this mid line and all she has is a smoke and a dash, you're in a kill box. If you take this aggro B line and you get back, you're in a kill box. Same thing on A. If you even do this jump across, you burn your dash, bad timing, you're in a kill box. And you only have a smoke. You don't have any flashes to kind of play off a line, which I'm not saying flashes are that high value either, but that's just sort of the thought process that comes to on the map. And then if we're talking attack side, it's the same sort of like reasoning. We can start conditioning on B, throw a clone, throw a flash, take this TP, take the backside TP, and then this can just become a clone and a flash, and then later can just become a flash with everything else being talked about. And then immediately our Yoru is actually mid, or immediately our Yoru is now B. And as we force your rotate, we're now able to strong side take A instead. Whereas if you're playing with a Jett and you try to do this Jett on this conditioning, your Jett is sold. And now you're playing with one less body. You have your lurker that needs to activate, and you have even less people on A. Just something to kind of think about. But as mentioned, the main focus of this, based on the data we have in front of us, should not be the conclusion of, is it Yoru or is it Jett? But actually, the focus we want to take should be, why is this specific composition so statistically bad? And specifically, is this the larger problem with why Yoru's stats look so bad on the map? And let's discuss that real quick. So if we go back, we'll just use this as a background. I went through earlier today. I did some nerd stuff. And I went through the 18 total Yoru or not 18. Yeah, 18 total. I had 18 total matches for Yoru. He won 4, lost 14. Right. And these were matches taken between all regions of kickoff. I was just making sure my math is right on my other monitor while I second guess myself. But anyways, 18 total matches, non-mirror. So these are specifically for this. This is Yoru versus any comp that's not Yoru. So only 4 wins, 14 losses. This is valid. We can still look at this and go, why does this seem so bad? What is the outlier here? What's wrong? So that's where we start looking at the losses and analyzing where they came from. So of the 14 losses where it was Yoru with Double Orb was 43%. So 6 of the 14 losses were comps that involved Double Orb with Yoru. That's a big number, relatively. Of the 14 losses that were with Yoru and then a wall and an orb controller, this was mostly Harbor and Omen or Harbor Astra. Only three of the 14 were tied to that. So 21%, smaller number. And then the other major notable, rounding out the rest of the losses, were Yoru with any solo smoker. So this is either Yoru plus Omen or Yoru plus Astra. 5 of the losses attributed to that. So 36% of these losses were solo smoke and Yoru. And when we look at this, we need to kind of look deeper at the same time. Because if you go back and you look at VLR, 2 of these 5 losses were from Team Heretics, who drastically changed their comp after getting blown out and mostly perma-banning this map. They did not like playing Abyss. They changed their comp on the back end when they were forced to play it, and they didn't look any greater on the map. One of these 5 losses was from T1, who perma-banned Abyss through all of Pacific until Grand Finals when they were forced to show it. And then one was from Foot, where they played Yoru plus double info, single smoker, which is a choice. And then the last one was from G2 in Grand Finals, where they played Sentinels, and Sentinels played double orb but switched their initiators up to try and hard counter chamber. So when we look at this here, the big thing that sort of stands out to me, if we account for these kind of outlier games, specifically the Heretics and T1, and we look at the double orb problem, this seems like a bigger issue to me and where I would draw my line to. Like, why is double orb doing this much worse statistically? So we take that and we go a little bit deeper informationally. So now this is just looking at the base non-mirror win rate. So all of the Yoru plus wall and orb comps versus anything else. Won 1 game, lost 3, 25% win rate. Okay. You know, Yoru plus any double orb combination won 1 match, which was Gentlemates versus Team Heretics before they changed their comp, and lost 6, leading to a 14% win rate. This stands out to me the same way this stood out to me as something we should probably look into. And then this last one here was Yoru with solo smokes, won 2 games, lost 5 games for a roughly 29% win rate. And the reason I have this data here is if we take this information into consideration and we cut the 2 maps from a team that perma-banned the map, and we cut the other map from a team that perma-banned the map, it goes from a 2-5 record to a 2-2 record. And now you can argue this is biased, but at the same time, we need to be considerate when we're looking at data with a small sample size this way. And you kind of have to manually scrape the games that don't really provide value to what you're looking for. And if you asked me logically, I would put more value on Foot believing double info was the way than I would teams that perma-banned this map and were forced to play it because they had no other choice. So if we cut these maps out, you end up with a 2-2 record where now Yoru plus Solo Smokes has a 50% non-mirror win rate, which looks a lot better overall, even in a small data set, right? So again, this looks okay. This, you can argue there's probably some other branches we can take from this, right? And we can look at, you know, is the issue the Harbor? Is the issue Harbor Omen versus Harbor Astra? But for the sake of this video, we're going to look at this double orb problem. This is a big enough outlier to me that it involves us, again, taking another step and looking further, which is something that I did. So I went through and each region, and I looked at double orb and its general non-mirror win rate data. So I took every team that played Abyss and the comp they played versus double orb and what the win-loss record was. And I'm not going to repeat all these, but it was relatively even in Pacific. It was relatively even in EMEA. And then in China, ironically enough, was when every other comp outside of double orb started getting an edge, given that double orb sort of blew up in prominence because of EDG. And then in Americas, that edge got furthered where double orb just got essentially punished in this region for the most part, which resulted in the conclusion of this short hypothesis that any comp versus double orb on Abyss, any comp is just fundamentally better. If you play anything else into the double orb matchup, that matchup loses because everything else is a near 60% win rate, whereas the double orb win rate only has a 41% win rate on the map, which is something that was relatively shown in TMV's vid, right? Give credit where it's due here. We see right here, like the win rate of double orb plus Yoru is bad. But the main focus I want to take from this is instead of looking at this and going, it's a double orb issue, we're focusing it on Yoru being the issue, not the fact that this win rate of this comp is just simply not good. And that's kind of the discussion I just wanted to have real quick today when talking about this is make sure you do your due diligence with data analysis. And if you have the time and you desire to learn more, to look deeper in different situations like this, because when you look at analysis like this is what trips a lot of teams up to get a wrong read on the meta. For example, the Breach Teo combination on Lotus, like Breach statistically on this map, horrible win rate alone. But what opened this up was the combination of Teo with the combination of, you know, Astra or Omen based on comfort. And then you have further flexibility with Yoru and Raze. Because the combination of these agents alone, especially Yoru Teo, frees up the weaknesses that Teo used to have on this map. The same thing goes for Bind. Bind typically was a real bad solo Yoru map. But when you pair him with Teo, Breach, and then Astra, allows you to use util in a way that actually frees up Yoru's gate crashes to be more effective. So you can actually make solo Yoru work on this map if you wanted to. But of course, it's always going to be a good Raze map, period. That's just how Bind works. But like I said, this isn't to flame TMV. It's just to have a discussion about looking at data and how you come to a conclusion in that data to what is maybe good and what is maybe bad, and why you can't always look at it at face value, especially when you're dealing with small data sets. So if you enjoyed this, you know, or if you have further comments Or if you have any other questions, you can leave a comment on the video. You can join the Discord. Ask me questions in Discord. I have relatively decent time right now, at least for now, to answer some questions. And I'm always down to just have a discussion. I'm a coach. I nerd out on Val. So either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and night, wherever you are. See you next time when they're out.